We are in the final 2 weeks of our current series, Starting Point. The purpose of this journey has been to explore what it might look like if we take some of the basic aspects of our faith and hit the restart button. To take the simpler understanding we might have had at the beginning of our faith and turn it into something more real and relevant for our adult lives. Because sometimes the faith we have carried since our childhood is just not enough for the realities of the world we face as adults. Today, we are going to deal with perhaps the most basic yet overlooked concept that we've talked about so far, and that is faith itself. What is faith? What does it mean to believe? Those basic questions lead to much more specific ones. Does God exist? Was Jesus really raised from the dead? How can we know that we are not just chasing some fantasy? The first thing I want to say, and I've said this before in this series, but it's so important to remember, it is okay to have questions about faith. It is even okay to have some doubts. There are some Christians who say those things are a sign of weakness, and that with true faith, doubts and questions never exist. But that is not my experience. Some of the most faithful people I know have, at times, expressed some doubts and had more than a few questions. It happens, and it is okay. When you look at the definition of faith, it is no wonder that doubt can be so real. This is how Scripture defines faith. Now, faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. Being sure of what we hope for and having conviction in what we do not see can be a pretty tough thing to do. A lot of us struggle to have faith in the things we cannot see, things we cannot know. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about that struggle, and I hope that in so doing, we will find a new starting point for how we approach faith and what it means in our life. I want to begin that conversation with this reality. Faith is perhaps the most confused, misused, and abused concept in religion. We do everything from oversimplifying faith to overcomplicating faith. And in the process, I cannot help but wonder if we've lost sight of what faith really is. Perhaps this is a good place to begin. The ability to have faith, to believe, is one of the most powerful forces of humankind. To be clear, I'm not just talking about religious faith here. Think about this for a moment. Very few things in human history have been accomplished by accident. For the most part, someone had to imagine something, to envision something, and then they had to believe it could happen. Everything from the wheel to human flight, from the pasteurization of milk to cures for disease, from electricity to iPads, from Morse code to cell phones. All of it, every bit of it was at one time unimaginable, unthinkable, unbelievable. But then someone came along with a thought, an idea, a belief, and they got to work. Even in places where common logic and common sense said that there was no way that thing could happen, they held on to a belief that it could. They had faith in their idea, and they went to work making it a reality. Think about how many things we have because someone believed it could be so, even when so many others were saying, no way. And belief isn't just about the things we've created. It's also about the ideologies we've thought of as well. Sometimes the things someone believes, the idea someone has, creates a movement around which people come together. That can be a great thing. Our nation was founded on a set of beliefs and ideals that drove our founders to create a more perfect union. The civil rights movement was started by a group of people who came together with the belief that all people were created equal and the courage to stand up and fight for justice and equity. But sometimes the beliefs around which ideologies grow can cause tremendous pain and suffering. The rise of Nazism in the 1920s and 30s show how ideas and words can drag people into believing that the evilest of things is the right path to take. What happened during that time was made possible not by what was real, but what was believed. Another thing that can happen when we strongly believe in something is this. We constantly look for evidence to support what we believe to be true. Political beliefs are a great example of this. When we get locked into a political ideology or a political side, it can be hard to stay objective, and sometimes we will go out of our way to find every affirmation of our belief and every negation of our opposition's belief that we can find. There are even some of us who don't wait to hear what another person believes when it comes to politics and why they believe it. If they are in the wrong political party, they are just wrong. And if we're keeping it real, there are some of us who express more passion for and devotion to our political party or favorite politician than we do for God. There are a lot of days when I think that if we put half the energy we put into politics into our faith, our world would be a far better place. Of course, the challenge is that our faith demands that we make room for those on the other side, even our enemies. And right now, our political beliefs don't always allow for that. Unfortunately, a lot of us are choosing our political team over our religious one, or even worse, we assume God has chosen our political team and everything it stands for. That is not a good place to be. It is also a good example of why our beliefs and how we express them can be so powerful and so dangerous. If we aren't careful, when we start believing in something, we often begin to think our way is not only the best way, but that it should be the only way. And so we look for things that support our beliefs while negating things that challenge them. And that brings me to my next point about believing in something. Belief is easiest to maintain when in a community of shared belief. Whether it is within a church, a political party, or any other group, it is easiest to maintain our beliefs when surrounded by people who believe the same thing. Then, when we have doubts and questions or begin to see things differently, they can help us see beyond our doubts and get us back to the way we believe things are and or should be. And that's not always a bad thing. In fact, it can be quite good. And it is one of the most important roles of the faith community. But with that role comes the responsibility of making sure we aren't dictating what those beliefs are in a way that doesn't make room for variation. Bottom line, faith and belief is a very powerful thing. There is great power behind believing, and that power can lead to both good and bad things. It can both create and solve the greatest problems. It can both unite and divide. It can both cause oppression and free people from it. Belief can move mountains for good or for evil. And faith is not just about religion. It is about a lot of other things as well. With that in mind, let's get back to this whole faith and religion thing. At its core, religious belief is simply belief applied to things of a religious nature. Every religion is based on a series of what could be called believe thats. We believe that. Complete the sentence. For example, Christians believe that Jesus was the Messiah. Members of the Jewish faith believe that the Messiah has yet to come. Muslims believe that Muhammad was the last prophet sent by God to humankind. What happens in religious communities is that we take these basic "we believe that" statements and we build a belief system around them. At the most basic level, people of a particular faith group believe in and are part of the same belief system. The 5 pillars of Islam and the teachings of the Quran provide the basic foundation of belief for all Muslims. The teachings of Torah are at the heart of Judaism. As Christians, we believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God, and we accept the New Testament as the primary sacred text of our faith. It is fairly standard that each member of these faith groups believe these things. However, once you start to dig in a little deeper, things get more complicated. For example, while Christians believe in Jesus and accept the New Testament as our primary sacred text, how we interpret and understand who Jesus was and how the New Testament is to be read can be really, really different. While you can be in a room full of Christians who say that they all believe in Jesus, it only takes a few questions about our faith and how we are called to live out our faith to reveal how different our beliefs ultimately are. Then if we aren't careful, the one thing that is meant to bring us all together becomes a primary source of conflict and pain. Those who are the most convicted in what they believe take sides and dig in, fighting for what they think is right and calling into question the faith of those who believe differently. While the convicted among us are caught up in conflict, fighting over who's right and who's wrong, those who are just trying to make sense out of faith or trying to figure out what they believe find themselves on the outside looking in, and not only questioning their own beliefs, but also whether there is any room for them and their doubts or questions in the church. They also start to wonder whether they even want to be part of the church if that's what it looks like. These are just a few of the many reasons I think we need a new starting point when it comes to how we understand the idea of faith and belief. First of all, there's not a person alive who has this whole faith thing figured out. There is not a person alive who's got everything right when it comes to the truths and realities of our faith. There are those who think they do. That's not how this works. Maybe, just maybe, instead of viewing faith as something out there to be mastered, to be fully grasped and understood, we see faith as a journey where we are going, always learning, always growing, always seeking. Maybe instead of viewing faith as something you either have or don't have, we see it as the spectrum it really is, where we allow for the strength of conviction, but we also welcome doubt. Maybe instead of viewing the strength of faith by how big our faith is, we remember that Jesus taught us that even faith so small as to be the size of a mustard seed is enough to move mountains. Maybe, just maybe, the key to having the kind of faith that provides us the assurance of things hoped for and the convictions of things not seen is remembering that when it comes to matters of faith, every one of us is in some way still at the starting point of our journey. And the best way for us to realize the things we hope for, to live into the promises of faith we have yet to see, is to remember that the only way we can get there is by getting there together. Friends, we need each other. Some days it feels like we've forgotten that, and there are a lot of days when it's clear we've lost our faith in one another. While that might be a helpful narrative for the politics of division, it does not reflect the teachings of our faith. After all, we are called to be one body with one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and creator of us all, who is above all and through all and in all. Maybe if we remembered that, we might not only increase our faith in God, we might also increase our faith in one another. I know that kind of unity is hard to imagine right now, and that for some, it sounds too good to be true. But as we've talked about today, faith is a powerful thing, and I can't think of a better starting point for building the kind of world and the kind of church we hope for, but have not yet seen. Amen.